Okay, folks, let's get started. Yeah, I didn't get this playing off. Let's get started, folks. We've got a very special program for you all today as part of our 150th anniversary, our sesquicentennial. We've got a panel of experts who are going to teach us some secrets of the nave here today. First, we're going to start out with Diane Heath, who's going to talk about the amazing Flentrop organ. Then art historian Barbara Wolanin and parishioner is going to talk about our stained glass windows. And we're going to wrap up with our own son of St. Columbus, John Guenther, who's going to take us through the nave itself, the broader nave. The structure of this place helps determine the liturgy, and the liturgy helps to determine the structure of this place, and has for years. So the context here is powerful. And I think we're all going to learn something. I'm very excited about this. These guys have put in the time. We're going to start with Diane, then we're going to go to Barbara, and then to John, correct? All right. I'm going to pass the mic to our own Diane Heath. Thanks, Diane.
So the name of our pipe organ is Flentrop. It's a Dutch name because that's where the organ was built. But before the organ was built, there was a committee to decide what kind of organ we would have. And Judy Dodge, longtime director of music here, would have been on that committee and influencing things substantially, I imagine. But the committee went all over the country looking at different kinds of pipe organs and deciding what would be best for our space. The instrument that they chose is unusual. This Flentrop pipe organ from the Netherlands is what's called a tracker organ, and it means that everything inside, with one exception, is mechanical. So there's very little that's happening electronically, except that it does plug in so that we don't have to have boys pumping the bellows. So in that way, it's very similar to the instrument that Bach would have had or Mendelssohn would have had. And the other similarity is its elegance. The sounds that we hear are just beautifully designed to be unique. They were built for this space specifically. They work with the acoustics of the room. Each of the pipes it's called voicing, but the inside is shaped with sharp tools so that the sound that happens in this particular room, the voicing can only be done in this room, is optimal. And pipes, how many pipes? I counted them up the other day, and there's over 1,000 pipes in there. Right. The case has on it, look, if you're in a place that you can't see the case, look at it later. But there are little oak leaves, and they're there to mimic the oak leaves that we have on the rude screen up there. So this Dutch organ was the 5th of its type, Flentrop, to be built in this country. Now there are 35 of them in the country, but it was the 5th. It was cutting edge. This was 1981, and this type of organ was a little bit uncommon. It was uncommon enough that the Fulbright Foundation would send organ scholars to the Netherlands to learn how to play them. And at one of the inaugural concerts, Senator Fulbright came and attended because of that. Judy Dodge, this longtime director of music, also, she would ask anybody anything to make something wonderful happen. So she asked the Queen of the Netherlands if she would come to one of these concerts, and Queen Beatrix said, "Of course, I would be happy to." And no small shakes there. So I'm in love with this instrument. I've been here for 27 years, and one of the real advantages to getting a beautiful instrument in a beautiful space is that your musicians will stay for a long time. Judy Dodge stayed for a long time. John Hurd was here for a long time. Ann Tim Payne has been here twice. It was her first position out of college, and then she left, but she came back. So having that wonderful instrument. The instrument was expanded in 2003, and a big fundraising push made that happen. The fundraising push was one concert in honor of Judy Dodge, the then director of music. And a substantial amount of money needed to be raised and was raised. In fact, they made more money than they needed. And so Judy Dodge, who's not afraid to ask anyone anything, said, we really do need a new piano too. And so we got this beautiful instrument, which is, I believe, 1958 Hamburg Steinway, so it was built in Germany, and it's been rebuilt twice. But truly wonderful instrument. And I'd be happy at some future time to answer any questions people might have. Also on our website, it gives information about the organ, so you can look on the website as well and read some of this information and more. So thank you for having me as part of this.
Hello, everybody. I'm Barbara Wolanin. I've been coming here, would you believe, since 1975. And every time I've been in church, I look at the windows and realize I can't figure out, even though I'm an art historian, I can't figure out what all the stories are. So I've been wanting for years to do something for the stained glass. I was able to get high-quality digital photographs made of the windows by a professional architectural photographer right at the end of the renovation. And I've had this goal, and now I'm really geared up to be working on it to get this story out about the windows. And there's so many interesting things that we don't know about them at all. Of course, when they were designing the church in 1926, they hired this company called Willett in Philadelphia that had been founded 1898 by a husband and wife. The husband had died in 1921, so our windows were designed by Anne Lee Willett, who had studied at the Pennsylvania Academy, was an artist. So women designed windows. And her son helped her with the company. He's the one that signed a lot of the correspondence with St. Columba's. And in 1926, they gave a list of subjects. They came up with the topics for the windows. And the idea is that you have the early life of Christ coming along this wall, and then his ministry here, and then you had miracles and parables, and up around the front of the church, the Passion. And of course, originally the altar was there, so when you were having communion, you saw the Last Supper. Now we don't, in the congregation, get to see all of that. They're beautiful windows. But the amazing thing is when the church opened, they had said, when they were starting the project, the feature of the new church building has been studied and wrought out with great care. A scheme that will prevent not only beautiful stained glass windows of artistic design, but a symmetrical art representation of the leading events in our Lord's life on earth, thus affording a teaching value as well as serving a practical purpose in beautifying God's house. And to me, the windows are just so glorious. And what was interesting about this company is Willett decided, and what was popular in churches at the time was Tiffany windows, a whole different kind of stained glass, and he wanted to go back to the Gothic style, 12th and 13th century, with these beautiful pieces of pure colored glass. And so that's what we have in this church. And the glass, I think, was imported. It was made they were made in Philadelphia with all the hand-painted faces and features. And the St. Columba's is the really glorious one in the whole church. And when the church opened, and I wish somebody had pictures of this, they had the Christ the King, they had the clear story windows up here, the rose window. That was all that was there. And then the rest was for people to donate. And, you know, then the Depression came, and the 40s, a few people donated some windows. The 50s, a few more windows. And it would have been like, I remember seeing the cathedral when it had the plain windows before they came in. And would you believe, the last one, I think, didn't get put in until 1966. All those years later, 40 years later. And the St. Columba one, 1957. And so that was a huge thing, and it was the most expensive of any of the windows. The original contract was for $3,500. which was more than any of the others. And they said, well, if you want it simpler, we can cut the price. But they decided, no, we don't want it simpler. And the $3,500, if you translated it in today's dollars, would be $60,000, probably a lot more than that to actually recreate this, I think. And it's got so many details in it that it's almost hard to see, and it's so glorious now that it's been cleaned. And this window has all these little details of leaves and vines in it that really make it sparkle. It's cleaned, and of course the poor oak tree went, so you get more light through it. And you've got Saint Columba, our patron saint, their 6th century saint, such an interesting life. And but all kinds of little details. Under his feet, there's supposed to be little demons pulling him down, and the scene you have to turn around, sorry everybody, the scene in the center shows him begging for forgiveness, because the story was that he had copied a manuscript that his mentor didn't want anybody else to see and was supposed to give it back, and he refused to give it back, and there was a war that started. A lot of people got killed, and he left Ireland, where he was from, and found another place to settle, which was the Isle of Iona. Some of you have been there and know much more about him. And he founded numerous monasteries and churches, and just was an amazing, charismatic, obviously, leader and person that we can be proud of. And above him, then you have angels holding up his halo that says St. Columba, and other angels with a chalice, more angels above, way up high, more angels, but they're hard to see sometimes, just even from here. And then the 4 scenes around the sides are a story of his life. You have him with his teacher. Let's see, his down below is his early on copying the Psalters, the Psalms. He was very, getting out the manuscripts is really, really important. Above is the sailboat where he and actually 12 of his monks left Ireland and founded his monastery and church on Iona. And then you have his death over at the upper right, and then down below this legend that he had appeared in a vision to a king who then won his battle and then became king. So there's a lot of legends about him. But it's so beautiful, and the blue in these windows is so special, and I just really realized, looking carefully, the blue seems to pop out, but it's actually 3-dimensional. It's actually built out, so it becomes even more vivid and beautiful. And so, to me, they're such an important part of being in the space, the beauty of the windows. And my goal is eventually to at least get a brochure done, more on the website, but I would like to do a whole book about our church, our architecture, the stained glass, so people have it. So if people want to help with, researching who were the donors, exactly what's happening in each window, those kind of things, I'd love to do it as a team thing. Thank you.
I told Barbara and I were talking last week, and I told her that one of the things that's amazing to me about the Columba window is that until the tree fell, it had never been fully lit for us. And as sad as it was that the Columba oak fell, if you think about it, that tree was pretty big even in 1957. And I remember standing here, my first Sunday back after it fell, because I was actually on Iona when the tree fell. And it was the first time I could really see the gaps where the window was falling apart. So it was well lit, but sobering. I couldn't even begin to think about what to talk to you all about today. There was part of me that wanted to do slides, but then you wouldn't be able to see things. So what I'd like to do is try to describe how you can give yourself a self-guided tour of the nave. We will not get to everything. I got my first complaint email on Friday night about something I had omitted from this morning's talk. Please do me a favor, wait till tomorrow, but it's jguenther@columba.org, and I will entertain all complaints. One of the things that we don't have nearly enough time for are our textiles. If you're a cradle Episcopalian like me, you sit in the same place every Sunday. You've always sat in the same place. And so you don't actually realize that as beautiful as the kneeler is in your place, the kneelers are actually beautiful throughout the church, and they were all redone in the early 2000s. Don't panic. I'm not going to ask you to switch seats. But you might come in sometime when we're not having church and just walk around and look. They are glorious. And when you're doing that, walk up into the chapel and look at the kneelers there, which were completely restored in 1973 in anticipation of our 100th anniversary. And those kneelers, I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. We also have beautiful vestments that track the seasons. We're one of the few churches, thanks to our own Rosa Lamoureux, who can both sing and sew, we're one of the few churches that has pink vestments. We only wear those twice a year. They're beautiful. Our banners, many made by Patsy Stan, Laura Anthony, others. Our banners change seasonally. The ones that we have in the back right now for Easter, the purple one is one of my favorites. It simulates a sunrise to be a symbol of resurrection. It's just gorgeous. We don't have time for all this. These are the things we're not going to talk about today. So the first is they wanted me to talk about what's a verger. This is my favorite thing. Here's what we tell the third graders. In the early church, there were often cows and sheep and pigs in the church. And someone needed to clear a path for the bishop to get to the altar. It's a good story. Vergers in the Anglican Church actually got their true calling during the break with Rome, when the people of England were not necessarily amused by the fact that they had a new Church of England and the head of the church was Henry VIII. And the verger is the protector of the procession. The verger carries the verge, which is alternately spelled V-I-R-G-E and V-E-R-G-E, to keep people at a distance, to keep people from the clergy and to make sure the clergy are safe in procession. I can be bought. At St. Columba's, we're also essentially the stage managers. We're certainly not the directors. But Annie and I and Rick Delaney prepare the paperwork for every Sunday. We try to put instructions in there so people stand in the right place and say the right thing at the right time. We make sure that the correct linens are out. Working with the Altar Guild, we make sure that we have the right number of chalices, all of those things. That's what we do on a Sunday morning. But the stick is not ceremonial. Test me. To talk a little bit about the church, the best way to think about it is in terms of geography. And it's fun because I'm looking out at this crowd and there's some of you who will remember what I'm talking about. And for some of you, it's going to be news. But St. Columba's, when I started coming here in 1965, was set up in a choir arrangement. So if you can picture, if you've been to the National Cathedral, take the screen away. The choir sat up toward the high altar, which was against the wall, which meant that the priest, he celebrated the Eucharist back to the parishioners. And the choir stalls were on the right and the left facing inward. The organ was actually against the sacristy wall. The organist had a big mirror to watch out for naughty acolytes. We learned very, very quickly that if you were sitting on this side, there was nothing they could do. There was absolutely nothing they could do. The pipes for that organ were up in what is now the acolyte vesting room and the bell storage room. That wasn't a room, that's where the pipes for the organ were. It did not sound as good as this organ. The pulpit was on this side. The lectern was on that side. The reason for the shift is that when we renovated the church in the 1980s and created the nave extension, so if you picture, the outside wall was right there. All of those windows that were in the door were exterior windows. Pull them in. When we shifted, those people could no longer see the preacher. So we flipped the pulpit and removed the panels from the pulpit to make it look lighter. And at around the same time, St. Aidan's Chapel, which was here with the screen, moved here. And the altar was pulled up front. Now, here's what you need to know about St. Aidan. Patron saint of firefighters, a follower of St. Columba, and his symbol This is way heavier than it looks. Wait. His symbol is the heart, H-A-R-T. So you can see the slight discoloration on the parclose screen, right in the center. When St. Aidan's Chapel was here, the heart was over the entrance to the chapel. You can, Carol Merrill. The old people laughed, sorry. Sorry, Jennifer. But, so the idea when we moved the chapel here was to make this into a rood screen. In order to be a rood screen, as opposed to a parclose screen, which is what it had been, which separating the nave from the chapel, we needed a crucifix on it. The crucifix back along that wall was carved by Laura Oliphant, whose father, Pat Oliphant, was a talented and well-known political cartoonist. I see the nodding. She inherited his gift for art and took it in a different direction. And originally, that crucifix was mounted on top of the parclose screen. And I still have the stand in my office for that. The trouble is it blocked the view of the Christ the King window. So we took it down, built a stand for it, put it against that wall. That meant that this can't be a rood screen anymore. Rood, Anglo-Saxon word for cross. So it's a parclose screen. It separates the main nave from the chancel. Technically, it's a chancel screen, but we were just tired at that point, so we call it the parclose screen. When St. Aidan's Chapel moved, and people know that I'm a little obsessive compulsive about this, the families, when it was originally established in 1969, families donated 40 chairs for that chapel, and that's where we would celebrate 8 a.m. services. Each of those chairs had been donated. We took brass tacks and we hammered 2 brass tacks into each of those chairs. We moved them up into the new St. Aidan's Chapel, and people will tell you, the organists, when they're here early in the morning, will see me wandering through the church. And honestly, if anybody knows why people move the chairs during the week, tell me, but wandering through the church, making sure that we have the right chairs in the chapel to commemorate those people for whom they were donated. If you get a chance to wander up into the chapel, which you should do, look at the kneelers. They align, they tell a story. It's birds and fish, and you can see how they go together. And that's the old communion rail from when communion was up here. You'll see the center is missing. The center is over by the candle tree. That's the little kneeler right there. But those were needle points done by mostly women of St. Columba's in the 1970s. Dee, did you work on one? Say, Dee worked on one. I knew that. So I won't say anything bad about your kids. I threatened you, but I won't say anything bad about your children. Also in the chapel, when you go up there, that is where our aumbrey is. If you're not familiar, an aumbrey is a box in the wall where we store consecrated bread and wine. So if we have extra at the end of the service, we put it into the aumbrey. If we need extra during the service, you'll see sometimes we bring it out. It's a little like Julia Child. You know, you always have one cooking in the back just in case something goes horribly wrong. The aumbrey is where we keep those things, and the sanctuary lamp is lit when the aumbrey is full, which means it is lit until Maundy Thursday, and then we extinguish it and we relight it at the Easter Vigil. Okay? I talked a little bit about the parclose screen. I talked about the heart. Now I want to talk about the things I like the best. These are things you absolutely do not see as you come in. The Wigan Chapel and the narthex. And I'm going to start with the Wigan Chapel. It's one of my favorites. A lot of people call the Wigan Chapel the 42nd Street entrance. It's actually the Wigan Chapel. The Wigan Chapel, named for Trip Wigan, who was a child of St. Columba's, who died at about age 6 in 1973. A beautiful thing you'll see in the Wigan Chapel is there are 2 kinds of stone that are unique to the island of Iona. One is a Ross Mull granite that is red, that actually the abbey at Iona is made out of. It looks pink, and you pour water on it and it turns red. The other is something called Iona marble that isn't really marble at all. That is a serpentine that has white marble in it, but it's a pale green stone. If you go into the Wigan Chapel, the first thing you'll see is this strange red rock. For reasons that I don't entirely understand, Kathy Wiss brought us that rock from one of her visits to Iona. It's huge. How she got it in her luggage. Chris, how did she get it in her luggage? It was a miracle. It was a miracle. But it is a beautiful piece of stone from the island of Iona. I like to imagine it bashed in a monk's skull at one point. Next to it, on either side, are two candlesticks. They are green. They are carved from Iona greenstone. Iona greenstone, which has been mined since the Iron Age, and that is seen as a symbol of good luck, a way to recover past lives, a way to reduce stress. And yes, I carry two pieces of it in my pocket all the time. The stress part doesn't work. I'm telling you that right now. But that's the Wigan Chapel, and when you walk through it, you should pause and look, because it's really worth the time. The other place that we often walk through, though lately with the renovation, people have been pausing, is the narthex. And a narthex, in the early church, until you were baptized, you did not worship in the main church with everyone else. And baptism was something people did as adults. And when they were studying for baptism, they would observe or worship from the narthex, so outside the church. And that's why the font is there, the notion that people would be baptized and come into the church. Our narthex, which was part of our wonderful renovation, is just glorious at this point. If you look at the floor, there's a mosaic set in the floor that is the life of St. Columba. I am thrilled to hear that they're bringing back the Columba and the Loch Ness Monster play for Columba Day this year, because we haven't had it for a few years. And there are actually people who go to this church who do not know that the first reference ever to a Loch Ness Monster is in the biography of St. Columba, written not too long after his death, that recounts a huge monster, probably in the River Ness and not in Loch Ness, but attacking followers of his. And Columba, the old timers will remember, waded into the water up to his knees and said, "Go ye no further." And that monster turned around and swam off and didn't come back until it promised to help the tourist industry. But that's the first reference to the Loch Ness Monster. And if you really want to have fun, look at Bob Erskine designed that mosaic. Look at the smirk on that monster's face. It's a beautiful smile on the monster's face. Also depicted is the Abbey at Iona. If you've been there, it is amazing how accurate that image is. Columba in his boat with his followers, and then the dove. And of course, Columba means dove. The dove in that image as well. What you can't see is that under the font is a shell, and the shell is an image of baptism. It's hidden there. When we bring the font into the church for baptisms, it is revealed. So look next time. Next time we're having baptisms in the church, take a look at the mosaic, because you see the full thing. The font is another wonderful piece. We're still trying to figure out the history of our font. It has a plaque on it that predates St. Columba's. We're not sure where it came from. We'll figure it out. We have the rest of our 150th year to figure it out. It is an 8-sided font. The 8 sides on a font represent the 7 days of creation and then rebirth. If you go to the cathedral and you go to the restaurant in what used to be the herb cottage, know that what used to be the herb cottage used to be the baptistry. And that is why that is an 8-sided building. It's the same notion. Also, when you're in the narthex, look up. The ceiling is blue. I've named a lot of people, so this isn't name dropping when I say this. The ceiling is blue, but there's stars painted in the ceiling. My son Sam painted those stars. Using a plumb bob, careful measurements, and this crazy lift that he enjoyed driving, it's actually an accurate reflection of a constellation in the northern sky called Columba. And that's what's in the ceiling of our narthex. So those things that you just pass through on your way into church are you could miss them every day. I had a couple other things to show you. I know I've been rambling. I could go on for days and days and days, but we actually have church at 11:15. I want to show you a couple other things. This probably has another name, but we call it the bird bath. This is the largest chalice we have. I could have brought out, we could do a day on our chalices. But this chalice is special to us. This was made in 1956. It was made from silver donated by members of the parish in part during the fundraising for building what is the Albemarle wing. And then most of that silver, most of those spoons were melted down by actually a descendant of Paul Revere's and made into a chalice that is impossible to, it's like the dribble glass of chalices. If anybody ever comes toward you with this chalice, go the other way, because you will get soaking wet. But we put it out every Sunday. We have it out every Sunday. We have it there in case of emergency. I'm not sure what the emergency would be, but it's the first thing we put out every Sunday. It's also true that not all of those spoons were melted down, and we have the spoons out as well, and we use them for two purposes, one more amusing to me than the other. We use those spoons to fish bugs out of chalices, which will occasionally happen, and also to commune infants at their baptism. We clean the spoons in between. You maybe haven't even noticed this. We've used this the last year to bring the wafers up from the West End during services. This is a bowl that was carved from the wood of the Columba oak, purchased by the Altar Guild in memory of Wayne Fowler. And they purchased two. The smaller one we use in the Great Hall for the same purpose. We call that one Lil Wayne. This one we call the Fowler bowl. There are all sorts of things already in the nave carved from the wood of the Columba oak. The table back along the west wall there, two tables up in the chapel with us. They are just glorious. I have been going, I need to stop. Does anybody have questions? I'm going to walk around and I'll... Somebody else do that.
I feel like a complete retard. I should know this, but can you please tell me why we in so many places have an eagle for for the lectern?
I think I can. I think the notion, the eagle is sitting on a globe, you can barely see it, and the notion is the word being spread across the globe. It's not an American eagle. It is spreading the word.
Quick thinking. Anybody else have a question here?
Back to our friend the eagle. Do you know what is the significance of the tradition, and appears to be maybe distinctly Anglican, about putting the stole around the eagle?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. The clergy in the house, anybody know? Did you cover that? Were you sick that day? Yeah, I don't.
Flare, evangelical flare?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question.
Eagle fashion. All right,
yeah, that's right.
Next one.
John, how did you get your degree in vergerdom?
Well, there are two ways to become a verger. One is you join the Vergers Guild of North America. No, that was actually a serious answer. I know I was teasing before, but you join the Vergers Guild of North America, and there's actually a study guide, and you go through a course of study. That's a way to become a sort of C+, B- verger. At St. Columba's, we had Wayne Fowler, and Wayne was an A+ verger, and I was probably a C+ student, but I learned everything from Wayne. Fair? We learned everything from Wayne. In fact, in preparation for this morning, I said to Annie, I really did not to die, to which she replied, we all did. Wayne knew everything. He became the verger of this church at the request of Bill Tully. It was not something we had before. It's amazing to me when I think back about being a St. Columban before he was here, how we actually managed to function and get from point A to point B. We did, but it was a lot easier once we had Wayne. So that's the answer. I also read the course of study, but here's my beef with the Vergers Guild. You've seen how we carry the verge, 45-degree angle out, which is appropriate. And by the way, people ask me why we don't smile. We're supposed to look impassive. The whole purpose is we're supposed to disappear, which is why we dress in black. We're not supposed to yuck it up. We're supposed to disappear. My beef with the Vergers Guild of North America is they have an exception for the vergers at the cathedral who are allowed to carry their verges on their shoulders because apparently it's just too hard for them to walk down that aisle. Now I'm talking smack.
Other questions?
Other questions? You got one here.
I read in a history of Tenleytown that before this building was built, the McLean family donated a bell to the old chapel that was here before this building. And I wondered, was that bell then moved to this tower, and is that the bell that we hear on Sunday morning?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's hard for me to imagine, given the size of the bell we have, that it's the bell. Having seen pictures of the old chapel, it's hard for me to imagine that it's the same bell, but it might be. We have two bells. We have a large bell, and then we have a smaller tolling bell. But it's hard for me to think that either of those is the one in that story. But we'll try to find out. As I say, we've got 8 months left or something in our 150th year. So there's plenty of time. There's nothing but time. There's Woody.
What's that?
For the 150th year, do you plan to add something significant that people like you 20 years from now can say, yes, that was added during the 150th year?
They're nodding yes, and it's really it's a great question because the committee has been really generous with me, and they've asked me, what do you need? And I said I wasn't going to make fun of your sons, but I am. When we look at our processional crosses, our second cross is bent and twisted. But it's bent and twisted because Joe Payne dropped it in 1974. And then his brother David stood on it to try to get the bend out of it. And so I struggle with that because I look at that, and in all seriousness, when I'm teaching 8 and 9-year-olds about being acolytes and they're nervous, I tell them, he bent this cross. And then he taught Sunday school for 25 years. And then he headed a rector search. So it's really okay if you mess up. You'll get to stay. We might give you extra work, but you get to stay. So the answer is yes, there are going to be things, but it's really hard how we balance our sort of, it's like some of your furniture at home. You're like, there's probably nicer stuff, but do I really want to live without this thing? That's the hard part.
Make this the last one here.
Stained glass windows question. Who are the two guys with Jesus up there?
They're all Jesus. You want to say more?
Well, that's another miracle.
So one is St. Michael, and the other one is Melchizedek, I think, representing two aspects of him. The St. Michael was supposed to be Christ as an intercessor, and it's supposed to be showing him after the resurrection being in heaven, and the other one is like an Old Testament figure. So I've always wondered that too. I just looked it up this week. So, yeah.
Okay, we could go on all day, but we do have an 11:15 coming
No, that's
up.
okay. It's okay to start 5 or 6 minutes late. I've never been uptight about that.
Let's thank Diane and Barbara and John. This is fantastic. Thank you all.